using oil paints today, and this is a 3 by 4 foot linen canvas. I stretch my own canvas, and I use the linen canvas. Always used to use just cotton canvas, but as I've gotten older, I've stepped up to the linen canvas, which I really like using much better. I put a thin coat of burnt sienna on this canvas, and I used acrylic to do that. And even though I'm using oils, I can paint oils over acrylics, but of course you can't paint acrylics over oils. And the reason I use the burnt sienna, it's a nice earth color, and it gets rid of that white on the canvas, so I don't have to deal with that white shining through everywhere. And a lot of times, this burnt sienna underneath will show through in the final painting. Now, I roughed out this painting quite quickly. There was no mechanical things in there like houses or people or boats, so I really didn't need to spend much time in laying this out. So I laid out the palms and so on just with a paintbrush. Here I'm trying to put this light coming from the right in there, and that was sort of the feature of this painting that I wanted to try and create. And that's always a little tricky, but I just struggle with this for a while, and eventually it starts to come together. Now I'm working wet on wet, of course, so there's only so much I can do. But I always start with my darks first, and then I work towards my lights, because it's very hard to put light paint over dark paint because it mixes and you get this lighter color. So I try and place all my darks in pretty solidly first, and then I put my whites around them. That's why I paint the sky around the foliage. Now, some people like to paint in the sky first and then paint the trees over that, but generally my method of working is to paint the trees first and then paint the sky in over the trees. It looks like it's behind the trees, but I paint the sky in after I paint the trees in. Now, it was real important for me to get these dark colors in there because I wanted the painting to have a rich quality to it. And if too much white got mixed in with those dark colors, the painting would start to look weak. So that's why I try and stick with these dark colors so much. And a lot of times my paintings kind of end up a little darker than I want them to, but it does give them a rich quality. Sometimes when I'm working in the studio here, I wear this hat just to keep the fluorescent light from glaring overhead so I can see my painting a little better. Now, these dark areas that I've been painting, they can be rather thin, and not terribly thin. I mean, I want to use enough paint on here to make it look like an oil painting, but the lighter areas, those areas of the sky and the reflections in the water, those light areas must be thicker. The paint must be thicker than on the dark areas. Now, that's just really typical of realistic painting like this. The dark areas can be transparent, so they don't need to have that texture in them nearly as much as the light areas. So these light areas of the sky, the paint is quite a bit thicker than in these dark areas. Now, up until this point, I've just been working on this in one sitting. And in a minute here, you'll see I changed my shirt, and I let it dry overnight. And then I started working on it the next day. But now here you can see I've let that dry, and I can work on this some more. It's pretty hard to work on things that are so wet. So I use a liquid, and that helps the paint dry a little quicker. So even overnight like this, it dries enough where I can work on it the next day. You can see here I just bent the canvas down, and what I was doing was I took an atomizer and I sprayed some water on the back of the canvas because the canvas was a little bit loose, and by spraying the water on it, that tightened up the canvas. Well, the basic part of this painting and the important parts of this painting are finished now, so I'm working on the detail. but without getting all those big basic shapes in first, in all the large areas, as correct as I can as far as value and stuff, no amount of detail would help the painting if that were not to the point where I wanted it. So now I just take my time, step back quite a bit, look at the canvas, and determine where I want my details, highlights, that sort of thing. If you enjoy looking at my paintings, go to my website, bansomer.com. I literally have hundreds of paintings on there, and they're all categorized as far as landscapes, nautical scenes, things like that. So check out the website, bansomer.com. Now, the first part of a painting always goes quite quickly, and then when you get to this stage, things really, really slow down. A lot more care and consideration has to be used in areas like this to finish off a painting. One or two strokes in the wrong place can just ruin the entire painting. So things slow down here, and I just really take my time and try and consider every part of the painting, especially these highlights on the sides of the trees and so on. I really debated whether I wanted to put any detail at all in the trees in the background where that light is flooding over it. And ultimately, I decided not to. I could have put in some very faint trees, but I really like the idea of all that light washing over the background and just making those trees kind of disappear. Next up was putting the palm fronds on this palm tree here, which is pretty much a main part of the painting. And then, of course, I added a lot of small little details down in the water. Maybe pond lilies, just a few things floating around, reflections. I just wanted to give this area a lot of beautiful texture because we have that big sort of blank, bright area in the sky with very little texture. So to balance that out, I wanted a lot of texture down here in the water. There was no blue in the sky at all. It was all yellow, warm colors, white and yellow and so on. But I did add some blue down here in the water. I figured there probably may have been some blue sky far overhead where you couldn't see it in the picture itself. And to apply this, I used a dry brush, and I scumbled some of that blue in the water, especially in the foreground areas of the water. I'm using a brand new chisel pointed brush here. It's quite a small brush. And that way I can get a lot of nice sharp lines on these palm fronds. As you can see, I'm just really thinking about all this, kind of taking my time with it, as opposed to the first part of the painting where everything goes very quickly and boldly. And this here, nothing is bold about this. It's very, one stroke here, another stroke here, just to try and finish this off. Just thought I'd run this part of the video at normal speed so you could see, how intentional most of these brush strokes are put down. Since this huge blast of light was coming from the sun with those light rays, I was careful not to put much of this detail in the foliage as bright as that light. I did put some areas quite bright, especially in the palm trees, right to the left of the reflection there. But most of that was toned down somewhat because I just didn't want it to take over from that bright area of the sun. I wanted a lot going on in this painting, but I didn't want a lot of small areas to keep jumping out at people. I wanted to create, a nice harmony within this painting where your eye sort of float around naturally. Now, right here in the background, I did put a nice spot of real bright sunlight. I put some pure white on there, and as you can see, I wiped a little bit of that off because it was just a little bit too much. So there's a lot of very, very subtle changes that go on at this point in the painting. On many of my paintings, I will put a bird, a egret or a heron or something in the background, but on this painting I chose not to have any wildlife in there. Most of my paintings do, but this I thought, well, I'm just going to leave it out and see if there's enough interest in this painting not to have another focus point. So I left the bird out. Well, I think that pretty much finishes this painting. I'm just going to let the music play out here, and I hope you've enjoyed watching. Bye-bye.